Welcome to the Mind Behind the Curtain podcast, a show about the stories of incredible physician entrepreneurs who've navigated the chaos, doubt, and growth that comes with creating something new. In each episode, we'll pull back the curtain on their journeys, sharing the triumphs and struggles that led them to where they are today. I'm your host, Jenny Ekstrom, a physician, entrepreneur, and mentor. Let's take this journey together. It's time to explore the mind behind the curtain. I'm so excited to introduce to you today my guest, Dr. Judith Borger, EM-trained physician, med spa owner, and Martha Beck certified coach with recent certification in heart healing. She also is known as the aesthetic doctor on our podcast. Super excited to welcome you here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, I know that I did just a brief intro, but I would love our community just to hear a little bit more about you, expand on who you are and what you're providing here.
Like you, I think we have that in common that we wear like many hats, right? I ER trained. I actually practice exclusively pediatric emergency medicine. At this point, it's part-time, and sort of one of the things that I'm at, and maybe some of your physician listeners will kind of recognize themselves that you get to this point where when it becomes your fun hobby, you're like, how much of this do I get to do? Do I want to do at the expense of taking things out of my other time or my other endeavors? And also, like, how much do I do of this to make sure that I'm still clinically relevant and clinically excellent? So I still work per diem, pick up a little locums here and there, and I really love pediatric emergency medicine. I own and run a med spa in Fayetteville, North Carolina, that we recently also purchased a building about a year ago, spent a little over a year going through a whole renovation process because it was actually an abandoned building. And it was a 1906 abandoned building. And so we restored it to all of its glory. And so I've expanded into sort of a bigger space. So there's sort of real estate that I know you also have a little bit of your hand in. And then, I do coaching. In the past couple of years, I've coached mainly actually other entrepreneurs and small business owners because I think they've seen themselves in me and sort of connected with the idea that instead of being a more traditional business coach, because a lot of the things I think we run into is really this idea of I want to be an entrepreneur, and at the same time I don't want to be a workaholic. I still want to feel like I'm a good mom, I'm a good wife, yet I want to be successful. And how do we balance it all while being really successful in our businesses? And so, through that process, I think, have discovered that I love all the conscious thought work that we do. And there's so much unconscious sort of sub-programmed stuff that runs below the surface that I've really kind of wanted to get at. So, that's when I added heart healing because it had helped me tremendously. I think most of us do have some wounds from childhood, early adulthood, our formative years. In my case, there was a lot of trauma, but again, you can have wounding without there being very overt trauma, right? Like this is not a competition. But we've all been told that we're not good enough, that we're not lovable enough, that we don't fit in. And sometimes it's amazing how those things stick with people. And I will literally I just did a coaching session which was so powerful, and there was absolutely like zero family abuse, and it was a beautiful upbringing, and yet she had this voice of one teacher in her head that had told her that she wasn't smart enough, that she couldn't do certain things, and that she was like really a stupid child. And it has impacted her entire life. So I just love being able to bring some of the subconscious healing. And also, like I'm hosting a retreat in April. So doing a little bit of all the things and trying to live my life to the fullest while doing some good for the world, hopefully.
That's amazing. You know how I love being able to do all the things that we don't have to be pigeonholed
Yes.
into one place. I'm always interested in hearing how people make that initial jump. you obviously you finish your training, you're doing your peds ER shifts. What was it that started you down a journey looking for other things to do with your time?
Yeah, the aesthetics was the first thing that I did. And really I think like so many people, I think it's a similar thing that you spend, medicine is a big dedication, right? And I didn't go to med school right away. So I did come at it more as I figured out I wanted to go to med school and did some other things beforehand, but then you do spend a good like 12, 15 years of your life between, you know, your undergraduate and getting in and medical school. And I did a research fellowship and then I did residency and then I did a fellowship and then you sort of got to pass boards and you start your practice. And so at that point you're like, right, like 15 or so years in, depending on what you do, and you have done medicine. And I kind of feel like there's this societal thing that sort of tells you like you're going to be a doctor. And and again, in my family, I think that was true, that both of my parents had that very like classic like generation before us trajectory where you like get a good professional employed job. And I was really always told that like your education is the most important thing, because again, I grew up in Germany. This was the post-war generation that had like literally grown up when Germany was destroyed in rubble. Like, and my dad was born in 1948. Like, so their parents had gone through two world wars. And so it was this whole thing like you got a good education and nobody can take that away from you. And then like you get that good employed job and like it will be security forever. And that was true for their sort of post-war lives, I think, where they kind of went to university and went to residency and all this stuff. My mom is a pharmacist, my dad is a physician. And then they sort of had these careers forever until they retired. My dad is one of those dudes that like retired and then unretired, like, right. And I think I just kind of found myself at this point where I was like, oh, how far out was I out of training? It doesn't really matter, about 7 or 8 years, which I think is a very common like time frame where you kind of know what there is to know about your specialty, in the sense that not that learning ever stops, but you don't, that those first 5 years after residency, at least in emergency medicine, you learn as much as in residency. And then it sort of gets to like a cruising point a little bit. And, I don't know if it's that we've always strived, and some of us are just people that like goals, but I did feel like there was a certain thing that, especially in employed emergency medicine, I looked around and I was like, am I going to do this for the rest of my career? Like, show up, pick up charts and, see X many kids a shift, like, and it's a very busy PZR that I work at for like days on end. And is there ever anything else? I mean, I knew I wasn't interested in admin, but, I already was faculty at a residency, but I just like, it was just that eternity of charts and no real growth potential, I think, that I started to be a little bit questioning on and disillusioned of, to just be like, oh, wow, like in these, 8 years post residency or 7 years, like if you think about it, we work what, an average of 1,440 plus the extra we work. So like 1,500 hours a year. And so you do that math where it's like how many, like over 10,000 hours of the same thing that you've done, and you're like, wow, in my careers there like another like 60,000 hours where nothing is going to change. And so I think that was my first thing. And then I really like, even though I love emergency medicine and I actually love it now, there was things about it as a specialty that I missed. Like I missed using my right brain side. I missed using my creative side, because it's really very algorithmic driven, right? Emergency medicine. And then I did also miss those relationships with people. Yes, you kind of see some kids over like on repeat, but it still is not the same as that family care relationship. And didn't think I wanted it. And then I found myself actually missing this, like walking in a room and knowing what somebody was all about and having a relationship with them and having continuity of care and knowing what actually happened to them after I saw them. And so that's really what was the first thing where I started considering doing the med spa. I think plus at the time I was driving 2 hours to get my own Botox done. And so, I mean, of course, now there's a med spa on every corner, but at the time, there was one plastic surgeon that was doing it here, and she had done it on me and it was not very great. And so I was still driving 2 hours back to my old injector from fellowship when I had started doing Botox for the first time. And so I was like, oh, this would be fun. It'd be creative and it'd be interesting and be something different. And so that's really the first thing, that sort of disillusion of looking ahead and not seeing any potential for growth. And at that point, again, even though I love my specialty, also realizing that one thing doesn't fulfill all aspects of our personality.
Mhm. It's fascinating because I too had that same sort of 7 year. You're so goal oriented, like everything is mapped out for you. And for me, it was after my second child was born. I was already married, already in my practice, was, already a partner, had 2 kids. And is this what life is for the next 30 years? It was fascinating to see how overwhelming that was. That was. What do you think it was in yourself that allowed you, I'm going to say permission. I don't know if it was a permission for you, but it was definitely permission for me. What was it in you that allowed you to look for opportunities outside that education, outside of your focus of emergency medicine, especially with that culture in your family of just finding something and keeping going?
Well, so, I did it gradually. So I don't think I needed that much permission because initially, like, my business sort of started as a hobby business. Like, right. Initially, I saw it as like a fun thing to do. I
Mhm.
was doing like some people I know's like little procedures. Like, it was a hobby business. And I think it was not until two things. I went through actual real burnout after my third child was born. No, sorry, second child was born, coupled with some postpartum depression, with some a string of like just bad, like cases in the ER. Not that there was any like litigation or anything involved. It's just like sometimes we see really tragic things, especially in the pediatric ER, and sometimes they like all cluster. And it was the perfect storm that like just a series of really bad cases clustered that stuck with me. I had a young child, like a baby, like an infant. I was trying to breastfeed. I, went through my worst burnout. And that's actually when I started coaching. Well, no, actually, it's when I started therapy and medication and all that stuff. And then after my third child, I started coaching. And it was one of those things that I was like, oh, this was so bad after the second child. Let me do something different after this child, which was like the greatest decision ever. So I started in Sunny Smith's EWP
Mhm.
program, the first one she ever held, because I had met her a couple of years prior in person.
Mhm.
And I had just had my third child, and then COVID hit, and we all know how that went.
Mhm.
But it was really like around that time through the program, and I did a series of her programs for about a year and 9 months. That I really took my business from this like cute little hobby to like an actual business. Like, so that was the other thing. I think in a way it was easy for me because I started as like a hobby business, like somebody opens an Etsy shop, or
Mhm.
like on the days they don't have a shift, like they might do some crafting and then sell it on Etsy. Like initially, that was what my business was like. So I think I gotta say, I probably needed less permission in the beginning because I was still doing my shifts. I was still doing all the things that were expected of me. I think I more needed more permission when I then really stepped into this, like, I'm an entrepreneur from, oh, I'm an ear doctor who does a little like aesthetics on the side, to I think one of the other big mindset shifts was this, like, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm actually gonna take this business like as a business seriously and build it and like act like an entrepreneur and then start cutting back shifts and like take bigger risks, going to the point where I like quit my W-2, like, right? So I think I needed more permission because initially, like, yeah, it was like a little hobby business. So I don't think it needed much permission then. I think it needed more permission when I decided to really like go all in. And I think what really helped me then at that point, and again, I think that's why coaching and communities are so amazing, is that I was surrounded by other people that were
Mhm.
also doing incredible things. When I first started, it was just me deciding to
Yeah.
do this. While when I really took that leap to changing my mindset and going to the I'm an entrepreneur and I have a business that I'm going to grow and run as a business. You know what I mean? Versus like
Mhm.
the little hobby business, like that was, and make serious investments in it and take the time and run it like a business. That was when I needed the permission. And I think the permission really was given by seeing what was possible, that there was other people, like, again, even though I was not at that time in her program, for being an entrepreneur, the
Mhm.
fact that you're surrounded by incredible entrepreneurs. And I joined Peter Kim's Leverage and Growth Accelerator, which is how
Mhm.
also we met. Like, right?
Yeah.
Like, when you're surrounded and you see what's possible, and that is what gave me the permission to sort of believe that it was possible, because it was not just me doing a crazy thing, even though there was definitely a lot of people initially I know that were like, my colleagues were completely like thinking it was so cute and it was so this and it was so that. And who's really jealous now? Like, not that, like, I'm not one of those people actually at all who's driven by, I'm going to show you, like, it's not my personality. Um, but it is very, very interesting because, people think they don't know, but you're like, well, first of all, I work in a very male dominated ED. There was
Mhm.
a point in time where I was the only female faculty there.
Okay.
So, like, it's like, it's ex-military, like white dudes, essentially, with some other stuff. So, like, this is not really on their mind. And so I know I was getting all sorts of like ridicule and being laughed at and all of the stuff, especially, once you then put yourself out there on social media and all of the stuff. Like, it's again different when you're doing it sort of in your neighborhood with your friends, like, right? But then once you start putting yourself out there, and especially but then, now there's a point where everybody's like, oh, haven't seen you in a while, like, it's amazing, like, and you're like, yeah, it's going great, like, how are you? Like, and again, it's not a and some of them have told me that, like, you have so much guts to actually do this, because, right, like, I think that's also what you hear, like, how many people have like told you the story about this crazy plan that they have and the things that they want to do. And like you talked about it, there's a point where you just jump off the ship. And I
Yeah.
think that's really what separates the entrepreneurs. It's that moment when you jump off. And I think really for me, that moment was not when I started. That moment
Mhm.
was when I
So,
decided to go all in.
yeah. So tell me how then, when you decided to go all in, what did that look like? What was it, what you expected? What challenges did you face at that point?
I mean, I think that it looked different at different stages. I mean, I think Mm, the hardest part of going all in is the mindset, right?
Mhm.
Like, at least that's what I found. For me, the hardest part, let me rephrase that. For me, the hardest part of going all in was that mindset of really drawing these really clear boundaries around my time and what I was willing to do. And then, of course, like, I now have a whole bunch of employees, like, also stepping into this persona where I was such a people pleaser, to then sort of like, you know, be somebody's like boss. And I'm actually like very like proud of the employer that I am. And like, it's uncomfortable at times when you have to tell somebody, like, right. And it's not like I'm mean or anything. Like, I had to, but like sometimes I literally had to tell people things like, like, we've made a closing checklist. Like, when you leave, you have to shut off the lights and shut off the devices. And like, like lock the door and make sure the towel warmer is off because like you have set my building almost on fire. And like I had to tell people things, like I've literally had to have meetings with people that are like, when you're scheduled between 8 and 4, like you actually have to be at work. So but those are hard conversations when you've like never been in that position of
Mhm.
like having to be like an employer and not just be people's friend. And and my trauma response is to be a fawner, like for your listeners, I mean, I'm sure you all know this. There's like flight, fight or flight, right? Then there's freeze. All of you know that, but then there's also fawn, which a lot of people with a lot of like early childhood trauma do, where you basically just like agree and people please like excessively just to like be safe and liked and protected and all of that stuff. So like that is, I have learned through a lot of work that that is like one of my trauma responses, because I don't like conflict. And I mean, I don't mind conflict now, but I'm a pretty conflict averse person. And so that so those were some of the hardest things, I think, was to really step into that role and realize that as an employer, and if you run a business, like you have to make hard decisions and you have to have hard conversations, and you're not going to make everybody happy. And I think those were some of with my personality, those were some of my major learning points. And then things like mindset, right? Like, not, I mean, it is kind of scary when you give up that W-2, right? And there's fluctuations in your business and you make big investments. And, this renovation of this building that I financed, like, I took out so much money out of my savings. Like, there's nothing left. I mean, it's all an investment in the future.
Mhm.
And like, there's definitely parts where the scarcity and the what ifs and all of that, like, again, coaching is just such a lifesaver, because all of that old trauma and all of that patterning and all of that not enoughness and all of that not being worthy of love, and whatever your song and dances that you run in the background, like that will all come up again.
It's fascinating to me. One of the things that you mentioned earlier about the clients who had the voice of the teacher. There's that scene. I don't know if you've seen the Disney movie Soul. You've got young children, but there's
Yes,
that
yes, yes.
scene where she is standing there in that cloud of dark, and all she hears is all these negative voices, and they're just a part of that chorus in her head until she realizes her enoughness, and then all of that just fades away. It's such a beautiful visual, and that's what came to my mind as you're saying that. So as you were doing this work on yourself, you're learning about yourself. I love that idea of fawn. I hadn't heard of it, and totally that resonates with me. How did you go from that place of that work on yourself to then realize that, hey, this is something that I want to share with others, and take that to the next step with your own coaching business?
Yeah, I think it does. It's a sort of natural progression again, because, we, I had this great opportunity that I invested in amazing coaching from the beginning, and I've really had a lot of amazing coaches since. And so I think just watching my life change little by little, and also though seeing a lot of my old thought patterns and those around me, I think it is a fairly natural progression to sort of again just want to share it with the world. And then also, with my med spas right now are one of those things that are really like, there's so many of them popping up, right? It's one of those like hot businesses to be in, but I think people erroneously still think that you will open up a med spa and like people will just line up and it's like easy money and all of that stuff. But unless you're in a very like rural, underserved area where like you're the only med spa around for 50 miles, like that's just not going to happen.
Mhm.
Like it's a very oversaturated market. It's a market where your margins are shockingly low. And so you actually have to run it like a real business to be successful. So I think with the business coaching, I also got approached as I got more and more successful, you
Mhm.
know, be like, how do you do this? Because I'm struggling. And even now, like in these aesthetic groups, there's like posts every day of people being like, I'm struggling. I, over leveraged myself with equipment. I can't get patients. Like, why is this not easy? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and so I think just by virtue of my success in the med spa
Mhm.
space, and also I think like my attitude with the success, that I was never about. So when I started, I remember distinctly going to a conference, and they were like, well, if you want to open a med spa, you've got to like have $1 million in capital, and you have to buy all the stuff, and it won't work if you do it any other way. And I started it a different way. And so I think that really also resonated with people, that I didn't do the franchisee model. I didn't, I built my own thing from the ground up. Actually, like my initial investment was something like $40,000. And
Mhm.
so I think it just like there was, what I also realized is that there's enough people watching you.
Mhm.
And I wasn't going out initially and saying, "Oh, I want to, you know, coach entrepreneurs." But then entrepreneurs were like, "I want that thing that you have. Like, how
Mhm.
do you get to do what you do, be successful, and seem to love your life?" So that's really, and it all sort of, again, it's synchronicities. It all happened at the same time, and I really felt called to Martha Beck, and so I did the coaching program, and I was coaching people, and I still coach people. And it just, again, I think it's just a natural progression and growth of, again, to like looking at, until very recently, I mean, now my life looks very different than I did in terms of like what I do for vocation. But until very recently, maybe a year ago, even though I was part-time in the ER, like I was still working in the same ER. I
Mhm.
was, I still live in the same house. I have the same husband. I have the same children, like, right? And so it felt so different on the inside, that
Mhm.
I think I wanted everybody to have that same thing and not be stuck in, the misery and the doubt and the wondering, is this all there is? Especially in emergency medicine, like right now, reported burnout is 67% of all ER docs are burnt out, especially since COVID. Like I see it around me anytime I go on shift, I take Xanax from somebody. I'm just like, I mean, I remember I was crispy too. Like,
Yeah.
so I think that's really where it came to be.
So where do you see that then going from here? I love that idea of crispy. So burnt out, you're crispy. I know you've got this amazing retreat that's coming up in Miraval. I'd love to hear what you expect that to be and how you incorporate your most recent certification in heart healing.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think is most interesting is that I do have certain things that I know I want to accomplish. It's a
Mhm.
little bit easier with the med spa because you can just hit sales targets and, like, you know what I mean, all the stuff. Like, um, but I think one of the things that I love most about my life, and it's probably the ear doctor in me, that I don't quite always know what's next. Like I'm
Mhm.
very much a, like, the universe will tell me and it will feel right and I will feel drawn to it and I'm going to do it. And so, are there certain things that I absolutely want to do? Like I definitely want to bring so much more healing and connection into the world. And I think that's really where the retreat came. And another thing that you might think it's crazy or not, either way, but I also am a very intuitive healer. So
Mhm,
I don't know, people call them downloads of visions, or some people call
mhm,
them dreams. And
mhm,
a lot of times that's where I see things both about people and next steps in life.
mhm,
And that's sort of where the Miraval retreat came to me. I had just this very vivid download of what was
mhm,
going to happen. And, um, I think again, healing is so important, because, like you said, everybody at some point has been wounded. And I really feel like I'm on a mission to like help heal the world. I mean, not in a grandiose, like, bipolar kind of a way, but I definitely feel like I can sometimes see people's wounds and I can see their wounding. And I just really want to help heal it. So, again, so that they can feel amazing and they can enjoy their life and they can live it to the fullest. And I just really also love the power of in-person connection. And I do think there's something therapeutic alone about in-person connection and all of our subconscious merging together and sort of the energies uplifting each other. So that is really the next sacred thing I want to create, which is why I'm so excited for the retreat. And when I already think about the women that have signed up and have committed to go, like, I feel so honored because, like, they're all so special and they're all so amazing. And we've got incredible facilitators. And yeah, I mean, it's gonna be magic. And so, we will just see where it goes from there. I've always loved retreats and in-person connection. And
mhm,
you know, when you ask my staff, and I think one of my core principles is the principle of belonging.
mhm,
And so I think that's also what makes my med spa business so successful, is that I have this whole culture of belonging. Like as soon as you step through our doors, like you belong to us, meaning you are
mhm,
ours. We will take care of you. You will be feeling like you belong. Like it's just like this big, giant, energetic hug. So I think
mhm,
that's also what I want to achieve with my retreat. And so that's why I've made some very like strategic decisions. Like there's not going to be VIP tier, because to me that no, if you all belong and you all belong and I want you to all equally be there. Some of you are not more VIP than others, and the same with like I have decided to make it open to non-physicians, because again, I think if you're a woman in midlife and you feel drawn to this work, like I think we also put this little bubble sometimes around
mhm,
us. Do I think it's wrong if people only want to cater to physicians? Absolutely not. And like, I have had the pleasure of having conversations that are so similar, the sames in the desires and fears and all of that, with dentists and businesswomen and realtors. And that I'm like, again, it's that which unites us that will
mhm.
really bring the most healing.
I love that. So much of that resonates with me. That idea of providing these spaces. I totally agree with you that intimacy that happens when we step out of our regular life and just give ourselves that space to just be with other people, and the conversations that come out of that and the growth and the connections that live well beyond those events. I love that. I can totally feel the energy that you're talking about. It makes me so
I'm getting
happy.
shivers.
What's that?
Yeah, every time I think about it, like it's a full body like shiver thing. Like, and that's I think also like how sometimes like you and I have talked about, like deep down, like all the answers are within us. And if you truly, every time you think about something, and I'm going to get emotional here, like feel that way, this is exactly the thing you're going to do. Like, no matter what the revenue number looks like at the end or not. Like, right? It's just
Mhm.
like, it's a different, like, feeling of like it being aligned with your soul's desire and purpose.
Oh. I love that. And it so resonates and it's so beautiful. And I love to just see your whole countenance light up as you talk about this. I can feel your passion. I am so excited for that retreat and I love how you continue to pour into people. It's been really exciting for me to follow this journey because we have been in a lot of the same communities and I remember hearing you sort of grapple with this idea of how do I make this next big step. So to see you at this space where it's coming to fruition and then see the expanse that's in front of you is just so rewarding. I love it.
Well, thank you. And I think that's really like the fun thing. And I feel like that way about like, all of our sort of entrepreneur friends, like in a way, like I think that is one of the most like surprising thing to me about this whole entrepreneurship journey is how I have really made like the greatest entrepreneur friends. And again, like you said, it feels the same to me. Like, and I had a conversation with Jessica, who's also a dear friend to both of
Mhm.
us, on the podcast like 2 weeks ago on my podcast. And it's just this idea of like watching like other women grow and become like their next version and stretch
Mhm.
and be incredible and to be in that circle of friendship and uplift each other and support each other. It's really honestly like unlike anything I have
Mhm.
ever experienced in like traditional medicine because I feel like a lot of like when I think about my residency friends, like I have amazing friends from residency, but like it's a lot of trauma bonding, right?
Absolutely.
Um, and yes, like some of them are my greatest friends, but I think like that is also one of the things that I really, now that we're talking about journeys, that I really want to highlight that I never expected is how great of friendships and connection and uplifting really have come from this journey that I could have never predicted.
Mm. How one of the things that I really like to see in people is how we can find things that light us up and yet not have to make a decision to turn completely away from medicine.
Mhm.
How do you feel like this journey has impacted how you show up when you are doing those clinical shifts, when you're doing your locums
Oh,
work?
listen, like I am the happiest person to ever walk into that hospital. Like, and people say that all the time. And I think it's also like because I still work at two academic places,
Mhm.
both when I pick up shifts per diem at my home hospital, and I do locums at a very academic place. I think it is showing the residents and the fellows the joy in medicine, right? Like I sort of feel like it is one of the lessons that I teach them without again being teachy about it is just the
Mhm.
idea that you can have somebody come on shift and be like, today is going to be a great day and we're going to have a good time and you're all going to step away and have at least like coffee and lunch and I will handle this and like it's going to be fabulous and like don't worry about this parent, they're just blame shifting, and you know what I mean, just like this different attitude because I like enjoy my shifts right now so much more than I've enjoyed them for years, right? Because it's a complete choice. And maybe that's what the difference is, that I don't plan to walk away from emergency medicine because I just enjoy it too much right now. And on the other hand, if I really like stopped enjoying it, it's a choice I could make. So I think again, it has made me like love what I do and see the privilege really, especially as somebody working with children and what
Mhm.
I do much more versus the like, oh my God, I've got so many charts in my inbox and I've got to go to this meeting and I got it. Like, I mean, it's like part of it, but it's not, there was a point in time where I didn't feel that way, where I truly,
Mhm.
truly didn't feel that way. And I feel like right now, I completely feel that way. And like I said, I think I'm always the happiest person taking sign out and also like being on shift. Maybe it's because then if I might be there tomorrow, I might not be there for 2 weeks, I might not be there for a month, who knows? But it's very, and the other thing that's actually really nice about that is having the more flexibility is that I can now come from a place of yes to all of my former colleagues. You can text me and sort of be like, oh, I want to do this thing on Saturday afternoon. And I'll be like, pick up a half a shift for you, like 6 hours in a year. Like, how bad could it be? Like, absolutely. Like, because I'm not so like, I'm already working 160 hours. Like, what are you going to trade? And I don't want to do this. Like, yeah, I say no when I want to say no. But most of the time, like, like I'm be like, yeah, sure, I'll come in, especially for a couple hours or a day. Like, yeah, absolutely. So I think it has really made me love pediatric emergency medicine to a degree that I had not loved it in quite some time before.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I truly believe that when we can show up in our clinical spaces from a place of abundance, that is going to have an impact on medicine, right?
Oh, 100%, yes.
Oh, such a joy to chat with you. And I feel like we're just barely scratching the surface of all you are and all you're capable of doing. As our listeners are thinking about how to find out more from you, where can we find you? What are the spaces where you're showing up?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for like really being interested in what's goes on behind the scenes. I love your podcast, the episodes that you've done. I know it's a recent endeavor, but I just always think every time I've listened to an episode, I've learned something new about, a lot of, again, we run in a lot of the same circles. So it's been really interesting for me to be like, oh, I never knew that about this person. That's so interesting. Or like you and I, like it's really the common ground, right? I think when you listen towards that, there's always something in each story that you have felt, even if the situation is different. Like a lot of the feelings are so universal. But
Mhm.
going back to your question, I have a podcast called the Aesthetic Doctor Podcast. I'm very active on Instagram at Dr. Borger, and that's spelled out DoctorBorger. So those are probably some great places. I have a website which is www.theaestheticdoctor.com, all of my offerings, all of my courses, the retreat. If anybody's interested in coming to the retreat, we still have a couple spaces open. It's in April. It's at the Miraval, Arizona. As I said, it's an amazing group of women that have signed up. So if you feel called to do it, definitely do it. It's going to be magical. And it's a CME expense. So I always think that is like it's also like that permission thing, right? Because when I had wanted to go to the Miraval forever before I first went, right?
Mhm.
And again, the fact that the first time I went was a conference gave me the
Mhm.
permission. So talk about permission, like, right?
Mhm.
Gave me the permission to spend that money on my own well-being because it was a
Mhm.
CME conference. So I'm hoping also that I'm going to give somebody else the permission that,
Mhm.
because it is education at CMU and you can write it off and you can justify to anybody. Of course, it's going to be much more than that, but that it is like a permission if it's something you've been thinking about, but maybe aren't in your journey, that you're justified, that you're worthy of it just because you feel like doing it. So yeah, so those are some of my things. And I know you're going to, if I forgot something, you're going to link it in the show notes.
We will put it all below so that folks can find you. Oh. Well, again, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I can't wait to share your story with our community and to continue to be by your side as you continue to grow and your impact grows.
Thank you. And I feel exactly the same.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Mind Behind the Curtain. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to share this with someone who needs to hear it, because often the answers we're searching for are already within us.